Hey everyone, today I just wanted to freshen up an old video on creating a research survey using the free tools provided by Google in Google Forms. So let's get started. I'm going to start by showing you a sample survey that I have sent out recently. This was a student stories survey. I have broken this up into 4 sections right now. The first section is the informed consent. Section 2 is the questions, and for this I used questions that were multiple choice. That is not necessarily the way I would recommend doing something like this, which is really designed for a Likert scale, but I'm going to show you a few options. The third section is really just an opt-out reminder, and then the fourth section is the page where they would show them thank you for considering, close your browser, and do not submit. So I'm going to do a similar survey in Google Forms. I'm going to add a couple of things to it. But let's go ahead, and I'm signed into my Google Drive. I'm going to click on the new button and just go for a new Google form. Now, right away, just to show you around the Google Forms, I've got a button up here that allows me to preview what the form looks like, and then I can leave the preview mode. I also have, every time I hover over something, or click on a section, this moves around. It is the place where I can add questions, import questions, add a title, description, basically just a text box, images, videos, or a new section. I'm going to start with this new section. So what I'm going to have here is this is going to be the survey title. And I'm really going to make this the informed consent. So I normally don't put this on here, but I'm just going to, so that you recognize it later. I'm also going to point out that when I click on the title of the survey, this is the title that it shows up in my Google Drive. This is really just for me. So I'm going to call this Survey Sample 2.0. I'm going to start by adding some sections, and you'll notice that right now I've clicked on the title. If I add a section, it's going to add it right underneath there. I'm going to jump down, click on this question, and I'm going to add a section underneath that. I'm going to call this section the biographical information. I'm going to add a section, probably going to add 2 sections for questions. But I'll add the other one later. I'll click on this, add a section. Not sure why it's not adding my section there, so I'm just going to refresh my page. Maybe I'll add a question first, and then I'll add another section. And then here is going to be the opt-out reminder. And I'll add a question there for right now. And the last section is going to be the thank you. So I don't know if that's just something weird going on, or if I have to have something in each of the sections before I can have too many. So I've got these sections. I named them right away so that I can show you how the informed consent is going to work. And I'm just going to copy from over here where I was creating this sample survey before. But it's got all my normal informed consent stuff. I'm going to put that right in the survey title area. Underneath that, I am going to ask the question. All right. I had too many answers there, so I removed one. Do you consent to participate in this survey? Yes or no? This is a required question, and it is going to go to a different section based on the answer to that question. So if they say yes, it is going to continue to the biographical information. If they say no, it is going to take them to the thank you section, and I'll get to that later. My biographical information, the survey that I showed you was not an anonymous survey, and so I actually asked a couple of questions in here. So I'm going to click on the section, and I'm just going to put in a name, one that is short answer. I'm also going to add one that is email address, just to show you one of the things about validating responses. This would be a required question normally if they got to this point, but I'm not going to do it for now. Under more options is response validation, and you can make sure that this is a number. In this case, email is a text string, and instead of saying contains, I'm just going to say email. And if it doesn't follow the valid form, I'm going to say please write of you@domain.com, because that's what an email address usually looks for. So that's all that is doing. There's other more advanced things, but that's beyond the scope of this video. For the questions, now I have one question in here already. It was just the one, that filler question I dropped in there so that I could create the sections. Typically, I would already have this survey written out, so I'm just going to copy some of the questions. If I wanted to do this with a multiple choice, it is fine. The nice thing about multiple choice is it allows me to put all of those answers in right away. The bad thing about multiple choice is that it puts all of these answers as words in the Google spreadsheet that you might use in order to calculate responses. So it depends on what your purpose here is. If you are trying to, do some sort of mathematical calculation, it's just a simple find and replace later that you calculate with. But if you really wanted this to be a scale on the numbers of like 1 to 5 for a Likert scale, I would recommend adding this question as a linear scale. The downside to the linear scale is that I cannot put all of the labels in by default. So I'm going to put not at all true to very true. You could do a description in here and put the answers of not at all true to very true. But the problem with this description is I cannot put things on, well, maybe I can. Maybe they changed it. I could put those descriptions on here with a shift enter in order to put those on different lines. But let's see if that actually still works. In the previous video, I could not do it, but let's see if that works here. So here I'm previewing the survey. I consent to participate. There was a biographical, does put it on different lines. So that's nice. It might take up a lot of room if I did that on every single question though. So what I tend to do or recommend is taking that same idea, and I'm just going to put a title and description right here. And just, this is going to be the Likert scale. And normally I would do this so that I'd have, 1, 2, list out what all of the things mean. And then I'd put a couple of questions underneath it. I would typically make that scale appear again, either by duplicating it and then just dropping it so that I could always see it on the screen somewhere. You could also make another section dividing your questions out. So if I were to create another section, and I'm going to show you another thing, I'm going to create it up here, add a section, and this is going to be questions part 2, but it's in the wrong spot. So if I click on it and I hit move section, it's going to bring up an entire little menu for me to move the things around. Questions part 2 should not be there. It should be after questions part 1. And I'll save that, moves it all there. You can always move the questions around and drag them into different places as you see fit. Another option for doing the Likert scale that is good if you have short questions, really short questions. I'm going to show you, but there's other uses for this as well, is instead of multiple choice, to do something called the multiple choice grid. The reason that the multiple choice grid is nice is that I can do, each of the questions. I had a question before, so I'm going to show a couple. These are longer questions. It's the same question each time. Maybe it won't let me use the same question each time. So I'll grab a couple of different ones. Put them in there. I'll remove those. The rows are the questions. The columns then become the answers, like not at all, true, rarely, sometimes, often. Very true. One hint would be you could combine this and just make these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as you go through there. The downside to doing this is that it just looks a little bit harder to read the questions, and I'll show you what I mean. Again, here is the multiple choice question, and it's this part right here. It puts so much space that this isn't always the most convenient way to read that, as opposed to if I consent to the survey and move on, as opposed to reading it as a question and then having the answers here. The last thing I'm going to do, typically when I get to this opt-out reminder, this is just a way for them to verify one last time, whether or not they consent, yes or no. So do you still consent? Write what you want in there. I'm going to add one other question because I mentioned in this one, this is supposed to be a place where I would gather information about whether or not they'd like a follow-up interview that I could use in part of maybe a mixed methods or, a qualitative survey. So usually I put that in here. Again, yes or no. Here, if they still consent, I usually say, go to section based on answer, and I'm going to submit the form. If they say no, I'm going to send them to the thank you section. Thank you section, I usually thank them for their time and just say, please close the browser now. That way their responses are done. If they decide no right away at the beginning, it's going to send them down to the same thing. Now, again, you can always preview this and see what it looks like. Responses are typically done here, but I can make another video that shows how to kind of manipulate some of those things and calculate them in Google Sheets. That's usually where I go, is say like, I want a new Google Sheet that is going to collect those responses, and it will create one right there, has all the things. I can do all the spreadsheet stuff later. The other settings, if you wanted to make this a quiz, I don't collect email addresses this way. I believe that is whatever email address they are using to log in, and that might not be the one that they want to share with me. So I just collect them manually. Because I am not collecting email address, I can't necessarily limit this to one response because they have to be signed in order to do that. You have some defaults for how those things are presented. Up here, you have the responder link, which is the same one that you get when you're done and you're ready to publish this. So right now, anyone with the link, I'm going to manage that. I'm the only editor, but anyone with the link can respond. I could make sure that this is only people in specific areas, but usually it's anyone with the link. When you click publish on that, it will give you the link right here. You can copy it. You can get that link again by looking here. But now that I've published it, I also have options to turn on and off whether or not I'm accepting responses. So you can always get to that. And again, once this thing is live and it has responses, I'll see some kind of summary here, but usually viewing it in Sheets is where I go. Otherwise, there are some other options about embedding this form. There are some add-ons that you could use to maybe import questions and, make some more nuanced versions of what we've done here. But for the most part, that is the basics of getting a sample form ready that includes consent, where if you say no, well, close your window. If you say yes, we're going to go through questions. I didn't make any of them required so that I could skip through here. You have a variety of options for doing that. I usually recommend having one other place. This was where, I agree for an interview. I could ask for more contact information if I needed at that point. If I don't consent, close the browser window. If I do still consent, submit the form to finish. So hopefully that helps you get into Google Forms and makes it useful for you in your research agenda.